In any case, I screwed up and missed a ski that was for sale earlier today for $1,500 best over on a 96 XP. It was clean with a video of it running and everything. We could have took the buzzer out of there. We could have took the harness, the NPM, the motor, a lot of stuff. I screwed up. I should have picked it up and I didn't. So whatever, I'm gonna keep my eyes open and alert. Maybe I'll find an even better deal. But for now, this thing's ripped out. So let's move forward. Alright, so guys, we have our donor ski. I just went and picked this thing up at a great deal. And I just did a compression test on the motor. It did start and fire good, but I want to double check compression. You'll see the pictures above, like a brand new motor. This thing is super clean. The ski itself is a little sun faded, but really nothing bad. This thing actually would clean up really nice, so it's really killing me to take this thing apart because this is my absolute favorite ski. I love this particular ski. Well, not this one, but this model or whatever. It is just the most funnest thing to rip around the water on. I haven't had one in like 8 years, and they're hard to find that aren't completely destroyed, so it's really going to kill me to take this thing apart, but I've committed, so I got to do it. Nonetheless, the thing fired right up. Now it's time for me to pull this motor out. It's actually fairly easy, same as what you've seen in the boat here for the most part. We're just going to yank this thing out. Then we'll probably paint the engine, get it to match silver like the other, get ready to drop it in. But I just wanted to say farewell to our XP. Gonna miss it, or maybe we do a project on this. I don't know, maybe put another motor back into it. We'll see. Different story. For right now, it's time to get to business and rip that thing out. And now the motor has been pulled, it has been completely pressure washed and painted silver again. Now it's not the same color, it's silver. I grabbed whatever I had and it is what it is. I will tell you that this stuff stinks. This was like burnt toast or something. It's absolutely disgusting. It is leaking a little bit of oil out. It's still full of oil. The crankcase is like it's supposed to be, unlike the other one. And yeah, it's ready to go. So we're gonna let this thing dry. We're gonna put the brackets back on it. We're gonna throw it back in the boat. All right, guys. So I just got the engine back in. It's just sitting in there right now. I still have to hook everything up. For those of you that aren't probably surrounded by carport and grass, you probably want to use a cherry picker to save your back. It's really not that bad. The engines really aren't that heavy. All I really do, because my padding's already off, just like shirts over that. Set it up there, get in the boat, same thing right here, and then I get inside the engine bay, and like I said, it's not that bad. You can set it right down in place, set it down, then all you're going to do is basically wedge the drive shaft into the back and slide the engine right onto the mounts where it goes. So there, as you see, it looks good. The silver is better looking than the old silver, but hey, it makes it look more like a new motor. That said, it's time to move forward. I gotta basically hook everything up to this motor. We are fortunate I did get the tool in today to program the key, so we're gonna check how that works. If it's good, and this ECU or MPEM is good, then man, I'm gonna be happy because that's gonna save us $1,400. All right, now that it's starting to rain here, I did find the issue, not a real big deal. I looked down here and saw this, and I know I had hoses disconnected, but this is actually our vacuum hose, which goes down to the port down there. Not only is it not connected, I noticed that, well, that's not so nice. So I have to replace this hose here, and once we create vacuum, that should be enough to pull fuel into these carbs, and we should run pretty good. All right, so I went ahead and replaced that vacuum line with a brand new clear vacuum line, and it fit perfect, so we're good there. Again, what I ended up doing was I went ahead and reran the oil to the block of the motor, which I believe goes again to the rotary gear. Basically the way it works is it comes out of the bottom of this tank right here. On the bottom side, it runs to this side of the engine, and then it has a return that comes out and comes back to the top right here as in a breather. Now I imagine that system is somehow pressurized. I don't remember exactly. I think maybe by vacuum or whatever. Regardless, it goes to the block and it has the ability to come back. What the previous owner had done is they went ahead and left that line on, took a cap and capped that off. Same with this engine. What ended up happening is this engine actually ran out of oil. This one, when I pulled that cap off to replace the tube back onto it, it still had oil poured out. So this engine was probably perfectly fine. I went ahead and pulled the head in. The head looks good inside it too. So I don't think there was any damage done to this engine. It was only this engine here. That said, it's time to put some water to these things and see what they do. All right, so one of the other things we're gonna have to do is basically change our wear rings. You can see right here, it's kind of tough to see. Oh, there is a decent sized gap around the edges of those aftermarket impellers and the wear rings, and I'd say it is close to about 1/8 of an inch. That is way too big. And the way I can tell that's a problem is that if you go to take a hole shot out of this thing, it's not going to jump out of the water like it should. And that indicates to me, since the impellers aren't damaged, that we new wear rings. It's kind of hard to tell from this angle, but I can see that there is a lip on the inside of that is pretty much wore out. And we'll see better when we get these things off. But those things definitely got to come off. Once they're off, we'll be good to go. And I think the jet system would be perfect. All right, so one other thing that we got to do is we got to work on these jet pumps. Now, again, I know that they have new aftermarket stainless steel impellers. Well, not new, but newer. And I can see that they're not damaged. However, one problem is if you look around the edges, if you could even see in there, if you look down there, for example, you'll see there's about an 1/8 inch gap between that impeller and those wear rings, which means indicates that those wear rings are wore out. It's hard to tell from here, but once we get those things off, you'll see they're kind of ovaled out. They're not straight, pure flat and meeting right up with the impeller like they should. With that said, they'll have to be replaced, so I got them on order already. Let's get ready to throw them on. All right, so one thing that we have to do is get the impeller rings replaced, the wear rings. And the reason I say that, if you look right there, you can see, even though it's an aftermarket, it's probably Seadooo or whatever it is, polished impeller, you can see that there's a gap around the edge of that, and it's probably about an 1/8 inch. And even though it doesn't look all tore up, that's because it's probably smoothly bored that thing out. Even though you can't tell right now, what you're actually looking at is something that's probably ovaled out to a certain degree. And once we pull those out, you'll see a little bit better, but those do need replaced, and we're going to pull those out right now and put brand new ones in. All right, so the next step is to basically put in 2 new wear rings, and to do that I got to take off the jet pumps completely. So I'm basically going to start off by pulling out the reverse gates, and then we got a few bolts that hold it in here, as you'll see all the way around. We've got a couple connections we got to take off, and then there's a couple hoses on the inside we got to get off, and this whole thing should pull right out. So let me go ahead and pull these things out and show you what it looks like to basically take one of these things apart. All right, so the next thing that we need to do is replace our wear rings and our jet pumps, and to do that, I need to take the jet pumps out. And to get the jet pumps out, I got to start by taking out the reverse gates you'll see right here. Then there will be 4 bolts or nuts that you'll see going all the way around it, and a couple adapters or connectors that you see like right here. And then there's a couple hoses on the inside too, and then after prying all that out, these things should pop right out, and I will show you exactly what those look like when I get them out. Okay, so we got the pump out. You'll see right there, that is where it obviously came from. What I didn't realize is that usually they have tubes on the other side of this, and apparently they didn't have it on the boats. They just separate. It looks like there's probably just an O-ring that seals that off, which is actually right here I'm talking about. Anyhow, you'll look at the jet pump, and if you look at the big old gap around the outside of it, that is clearly not right. The concerning part, though, is that it's actually not wore down or basically eaten apart. It's really smooth. I can see the several lines that are manufactured into it as it goes down here. So that's slightly concerning. I'm hoping, obviously, that the new one there was going to fit a lot tighter, and maybe they just had wrong wear rings. So I'd hate to have to buy new impellers that'll suck. And these look like nice aftermarket Seadooo or something. So anyhow, let me go ahead and get this thing out. What I have to do is basically take this cone off here, leak the oil out of it. There'll be a nut on the inside of here, and then I have a spline tool with a nut on the inside of this, which will just basically separate that and pull this whole thing right out. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to take off the cone right here. Keep in mind, this thing is full of oil, so you'll probably want to do that upside down, but there's 3 8mm bolts. You can pull those, then simply turn it upside down and just tap this thing loose. You'll see this thing come right out. Pretty straightforward there. And then you're going to flip this thing upside down. There will be a flat side that you'll put inside a vise right here, and just drop in your spline tool like so, and then you're going to hit it lefty-loosey. You're going to pop this thing out, and here you will see our Seadooo impeller. So now again, you saw the big gap that there was basically around this thing. It's like an 1/8 inch gap. What you want to do is take the new one and make sure that that gap isn't there. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this inside if I can get it in there. Needless to say, you can see how tight it is. It doesn't just drop in because it's a nice tight fit. That's what it should look like. So I'm gonna go ahead and I gotta cut this this old one out. They're a real pain in the butt to get out. So usually what I do is I'll take a slice and just slice it up and just pry it back. The thing pops out, slide the new one in with a little silicone, you're good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and reverse everything, put it back together, and I will show you putting it back in. And again, they must have put in the wrong wear rings because I don't see any wear. And in fact, you can kind of see those little ledges right there. That's obviously, those would be gone if it was an impeller wearing this thing away. So whoever did this just really put in the wrong size impeller, which I guess they were probably somewhat let down if they put this in and realized that the boat really wasn't going past 35 or going anywhere. So anyways, off it goes, on to the new. All right, so there we have our new pump, or new revised pump with all new fresh oil, brand new wear ring, and we filled it up with some OEM Seadooo jet pump synthetic oil. So we're good to go now. I'm gonna throw this one in and I'm gonna take the other one out. All right, so pump is back in. I gotta go ahead and make sure that I get out all this excess, if you can see that excess silicone that's in there. I should have done that first before I put it back on. I didn't really realize it did that. So I wanna make sure I get that so it doesn't cause any cavitation. And we're gonna throw the other one back in as well. All right, guys, so now it's time to take out the wear ring, which is that piece that you can see right there. And right now I'm gonna show you exactly how I do that and the craziest methods it takes to get it out. Okay, so to get this drive shaft out, it actually has to come out this way as you would figure, unless you had the engine out, like we did at one point, and you pulled it out that way, which is actually the easiest way. But because we don't have the engine out anymore, we have to pull it out this way. Now here, what you're looking at is the exact same setup as that drive shaft there. What I gotta do to be able to get this to come this way is this thing has to come off. Now, in order for this to come off, this has to come off here, but so does this piece right here, this little hog ring, and then this thing will be able to slide over top of it. Now, the problem is that when you go to hammer this thing back to get this thing off, the shaft is gonna move a little bit. It's not gonna allow you to do that. So what I've come up with is some backwood stuff right here. And essentially what we're gonna do is we're gonna put this on here with a little bit of a thing behind it, as you see right there. And what that's gonna do is that's gonna hold that drive shaft all the way forward, essentially like you see it right here, so I can get this hog ring off and slide this thing out. I know it looks, again, backwoods, but they make a tool for this, and surprisingly enough, that's the only tool I don't have that I can think of. So, when you gotta do what you gotta do, you gotta do what you gotta do. All right, so if I did this thing right, it should pull out with a little bit of pressure. And there it is. Now I can already tell you what one of the problems is and why we're having a little bit of a leak. On the end of this, I'll show you in a second, there should be a little rubber spacer, and that rubber spacer is not there. And what it's happening is it's allowing this the shaft to go forward just a little bit, enough to let water, or basically let the drive shaft basically separate from the carbon ring and allow water to come in. That's not good, and obviously whoever did this before, I'm not punning or putting anybody down, but they didn't know what they were doing, and they kind of screwed up by leaving that out. So we're gonna put that piece in there right now, get this thing back together, and we'll be on board to have a running ship again. One quick thing that I have to do, you'll notice sometimes when you guys have these jet boats that the impellers start getting real loud and start getting, sound like loose, rattle a can, just sound like crap. And actually a lot of times what that is simply grease being wore out inside your drive shaft. So you'll see there's a nipple here. There's two ways to serve it, two ends to service. There's one on the jet pump side where you have to kind of fill it up and make sure it's solid full of grease, and then there's this side. And essentially what it does, a lot of these newer Seadoos, at least the newer two-strokes, whatever you want to consider that, will have a kind of a rubber spacer in the end of the drive shaft that stops it from bouncing back. But what else actually helps that a lot too is this grease will pack in and push this thing out and stop it from bouncing around. So if you have a jet pump that wasn't making really much noise and all of a sudden now it's jumping all over the place, first thing you're gonna do is look inside the grate and through the jet to make sure that there's nothing hitting or there's no real problems. And if you don't see any problems, a lot of times this is your fix. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take a grease gun, pump about 3 pumps into that thing till I start seeing the rubber swell, and that should be good on both sides. Okay, and so the next part of restoring this thing and making it look better is getting rid of the ugly old sail handles that you see on this thing. Now, I know what you're probably thinking is he's gonna get rid of them and replace them. No, I don't think they make these parts anymore. I don't think, but nonetheless, what an old school tip of the jet ski and Seadooo jet boat restoration business is that all you need on this old raggedy plastic, it's an old heat gun like you see right here. Fire it on, you'll see how faded it is. First you want to pressure wash it, and then all you want to do is pretty much just hit it like you see right here. See that? It turns out just like new. You just gotta melt it and keep going and going and going, and all that'll disappear and look almost brand new. Not perfect, but the better you have a heat gun, the better it's gonna work. Kind of keep that in mind. All right, so moving forward, I am gonna show you guys how to do a DIY turf. And what I basically mean by that is it's kind of like a, I can't say hydroturf, but we'll say hydroturf, on a much cheaper level. Now, whether you're buying sheets of equipment mat like I do, which is usually a dark gray and usually matches Seadoos pretty darn well, you could also buy sheets of hydroturf and different types of turf that's on Amazon as well. So there's many different ways of doing it. This just happens to be the way that I do it and stuff that I use. I'll show you all that and I'll link that in the description below. But right now I'll basically show you the basics what you're going to want to use is a roll of paper. If you guys don't want or can't get a hold of like an art paper like this, or a wrapping paper, which is really all that is, you can use actual wrapping paper. You can use the drop paper that you put on the ground when you're painting stuff. You can get at a local Lowe's or Home Depot or wherever, and the whole roll of that's like $5 or $6, and you'll use a very small amount of it. But basically, to give you an idea of what you're doing, you're basically cutting out a little bit larger than the piece that you're going to need. I tape it down flat so this thing isn't going to move, and all I do is take a pencil, and I don't even use the actual pencil side. I pretty much just use this like this, and I go like this, and it leaves an imprint, because underneath this, to give you another example here, here's the right step, and I label everything so I know what it is. Underneath this is your anti-slip that's built into your gel coat. So essentially, because that's kind of rough, it gives you a nice outer edge, and you can kind of see what comes out when you do that. So far this has worked really well for me. It does a great job of covering up all this nastiness over the years where this fiberglass has gotten completely dirty and won't get clean, for like $50. Depending on the size of your boat, it could be even less than that. But I think a 4x8 sheet of this is like $24. You can usually pick them up at like Walmart, Meijer, pretty much any store like that. Most of them sell equipment mat, and that will be in your fitness section, back probably by boats or sporting goods, things of that nature. So I'm going to move forward. I'm going to get all the stuff labeled out. Not only am I going to do the swim deck, I'm going to do the side steps here. I'm going to do the entire floor, including the ski locker, and then all the way up to the front, and then the footing areas that the driver and passenger will be sitting in. So I think it's going to be a total of 2 different rolls, so it's probably going to cost about $50. But if you compare that to buying a whole kit for like $379, I think it's a pretty good price. And again, I say $379, that may have doubled like everything else nowadays. I don't know if it has or not, but I know it's not that cheap. So I'm going to keep marking this out, and then I'll show you exactly how I get this thing laid on. Alright, so I got everything cut out for as far as my shapes or whatever that I need for the flooring, and this will be the flooring that I'm using. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to flip this thing upside down after I unroll it, put a couple weights on it to kind of hold the edges, and I'm going to start laying things out. Let me show you exactly what that looks like, and I'll get into more detail on what you have to do when you do this. Okay, so as you can see, I actually have the mat upside down, and there's actually a reason for that. I'm going to be using a Sharpie to outline it. A lot of times I'll just use like scissors, not scissors, just regular pen, and then use my razor blade. But sometimes it can be hard to see, and it dries out the pen pretty quick. But one important thing when you lay these things out, if you have a small boat, you can probably lay out the whole dimensions the way it sits, just to make sure you're perfectly correct in the way you have it set. But it is very important that when you do this, notice that this basically pattern can go left or right or up and down. You wouldn't want it to be on an angle. Some of you that might be using a different material that maybe have like straight lines, you want to keep that in mind, because you don't want to go ahead and do your ski locker this way and then do something else this way, and then all of a sudden your lines are different on the boat. It's going to look foolish. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and trace this thing out. I'm going to try to get as much as I can on one piece. After I have those things traced out, I will show you what it looks like, and we'll get into cutting. So I currently have everything traced out right now, with the exception of a couple pieces that wouldn't fit on this one sheet, which kind of stinks. I have to use the second one. It's just going to be a very small amount, but no big deal. Right now it's time to get into cutting. Alright, probably the most important thing in cutting is making sure that your blade is straight up and down. Now, obviously you want to follow the lines, you want to take your time to get a good, smooth, even cut, but it's very important not to have this thing tilted left or right, because what will happen is as you're tilting it left and right when you're cutting it, the top is going to be like this. You're not going to like the outcome. So you want to make sure you keep it straight up and down as best as you can. Now, I've never actually used marker on the last project I've done with these things. I've always used pen, so I'm hoping that doesn't bite me when I'm going to put the activator, the glue down, that doesn't reactivate that ink. I'm hoping it doesn't. It shouldn't. I'm kind of crossing my fingers. I don't know for sure, but hopefully it won't. But like I said, the most important part when you're cutting this thing is making sure that blade is straight. I'm going to go ahead and start cutting this out slowly but surely, and then once they're all done, I will show you what they look like. Alright, so second pro tip, but not a pro tip. I like to use straight edges. So basically I'll take something that has a straight edge that should be straight, like you'll see right there. And then what I'll do is I'll take the razor blade, scrape it down along the straight edge, and run it straight down. That way I know I'm getting a perfect cut. I'll do all 4 sides, and then I'll hit the corners. And it seems to do a pretty good job when I do that way. Alright, so now I have everything cut out. I have it sitting down right now with everything weighted down from the weights that we were already using. This will help keep these things flat and kind of level them out for when we go to actually install them tomorrow morning. Alright, so it is the next day. It's time to start installing our pads. One thing to note, they did flatten out a little bit, not perfectly, but they're not super tight wound, so that is a good thing. So let's get into it. The first thing that we need to talk about is what we're going to need as far as tools. First thing we're going to need is a paintbrush of some sort, And then we need our contact cement. Now this is the contact cement that I use. It's not the one I typically prefer to use. The one I prefer to use is actually a gel, and it's the exact same thing except the red would be green on here. Usually this is stocked at most Home Depots and Lowe's. They used to stock the green as well, but they quit stocking it. I don't know if that had something to do with the pandemic or what, but what you see right now is what I'm going to use. This is a little more difficult than the green because it's basically, it's runnier is what it is. So anyways, moving forward as to what we need to do, basically what you're going to do is you need to apply a coat to both the part that you're going to be putting it on as well as the actual padding itself. Now I will say that I did notice, if you look already, I'm already having problems with the red. I knew I would. Don't use red. As far as permanent marker, you can see it comes off. Anyhow, not that big of a deal. We'll wipe it up. But what I want to do is I want to go ahead and put a layer on top of here. I'm going to paint a layer on top of there. We're going to wait approximately 3 minutes, and then they'll bond together. You're going to figure out what time is best for you. You don't really want to do this in the direct sunlight if you don't have to, because what will end up happening is this thing will end up bubbling up underneath it. I'll show you basically what I mean if that does happen, but I'm hoping it won't since I'm under a carport right now. But let me get these things glued down. I'll kind of show you what it looks like after it's applied. So again, you'll see kind of when you're ready to stick things together. Ideally, you want to get it right when it starts to get dull and not shiny, kind of like it's getting right now. I did a little bit heavier on the fiberglass, so it'll take a minute longer on that. But that's kind of what you're looking for there. You want it to not be dry, but not be wet, and you'll see that it's real tacky. So let me go ahead and stick this thing on real quick. And there is our first pad stuck. You'll see it's nice and level and flat. Again, I'm not in the sun, so I'm not having any bubbling. If I see that again, I will show you. But basically what happens is, especially on larger panels, when the sun starts hitting it, you'll start seeing gases from the glue inside there that are trying to escape. And you'll see areas that'll have a huge bulge on it. And all you gotta do is push it down and kind of wipe it for a minute, and it'll stick again. Those gases will dissipate. But it's a good pad, so let's move on. Let me throw the rest of them on. I will show you what it looks like. All right, so there is our swim platform. Now, one thing I do want to point out, sometimes you go a little farther than the edge than your edge you cut. My edge that I cut wasn't great right here for whatever reason. I don't know how I managed that. So I had a little bit sticking out of the glue. Not a big deal. You could usually use either rubbing alcohol or acetone will wipe that right off, as long as you're careful not to get it on the padding itself. The little bit of overage that you have will come off fairly easy. You shouldn't have a problem. So, all right, guys, so another little pro tip, non-pro tip. When you are getting ready to put these things on and set your glue, the smart thing to do is take a pencil and outline your very edging, maybe a little bit on the inside of your very edging. And the reason why is if you don't do this, once you go to actually stick this thing on or put the glue on, you're not going to be able to see. It's so hard to tell. It gets really difficult. So if you just give yourself a light border like you see right there, it'll help you a ton and help stop preventing stuff like you see right there where there's kind of overspread and not have to go back and clean it. Now, don't get me wrong, it is cleanable, but it's a lot less headache if you go ahead and do something like that beforehand, so you don't have to worry about it as much. So moving forward, we're still trying to work on getting it done. All right, guys, so there is the completion of our mats. Overall, I think it looks really darn good. Now, does it look as good as HydroTurf? No, not really, but at 1/6 the price, as in $75 versus $450, I definitely would suggest going this route if you have just an older boat like I do right here and you don't want to spend a crap ton of money on. This is definitely a good option. Now, I did have to straighten a couple edges because even after you put that stuff on, you're going to find out when you get it on, even if it had a perfect edge, you may not get it perfectly straight, so you end up straightening like I did on that one right there. I just have a little bit of cleanup to do. Not a big deal, but overall, like I said, I think it looks really nice, and it definitely gives the boat a little bit newer look, I'd say. So let's move forward. All right, guys, so as you know, it is time to do the upholstery. Now, this is the worst part of the job, and because this isn't a DIY video, it's more of a build video, I'm not going to show you exactly how to do all this because it's awful. There's so much work. There has to be all new foam on a lot of these pieces, as you can see here. All new vinyl. It has to be sewn. Plastic cut for the backing. There's just a lot to it. So I'm gonna go ahead and move forward. I'm gonna get all that done. I'll show you what it looks like when it's done, and hopefully it turns out good. All right, so all the interior is now done with the exception of the rear sun deck, and I'll be honest with you, it was a super pain in the butt. If it was me and I was gonna do it again, I'd probably just spend the $500 or $600 to have the pre-sewn units just to apply on, because there was a lot of sewing. It was a pain in the butt, especially this unit right here. This one is, you'll see in the picture above, there was like 9 or 10 different pieces that had to be cut and sewn and then heated and stretched. I can still get a little bit more out of it, but odds are the sun will take that out with just the heat alone. I did have a couple little marks, there's a little tiny tear right there. There's a couple little tiny, non-perfection things, but overall, everything turned out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with it. So right now, it's time to start putting this thing in the boat and getting it out of the backyard. All right, so our front bow is in. our front seats are in. Our back upper's in along with the shoulder rest, the armrest. Now it's time to put in this lower. The problem is the way they had it set up before, they wanted you to actually take a bolt and bring it up through the floor, in between the gas tank, down inside there, up into basically these two humps right here. There's actually 4 bolts. So they want you to have some kind of inspector gadget arms. Well, we're not doing that. So we're going to switch it up a little bit. What we're going to do, we're going to take this pretty little rib nut, and we're going to drill it through the centers of each one of these, and we're going to put a bolt down this way, so it's always accessible, and you don't have to do nothing crazy to get it in. Let me show you what it looks like. Alright, so with the exception of the sun deck, the upholstery is officially done. And yes, for those of you wondering, that is a wine glass, and no, it's not for me, it's for the local deer, for all you know. Front seats are done. I think they turned out pretty darn well. Not perfect, but pretty well. As you can see, the back seats are done as well. Again, pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. The rear armrests are done. Also pretty good. Now, my opinion on the upholstery and doing it yourself, if you've never used a sewing machine before, don't even try. In fact, even if you have, I don't know that I would do it again, because it was a lot of work. In fact, it was more work than rebuilding engines. So I would rather do that with my time than do this upholstery. Putting it on is not that bad. You shed a little sweat doing it, maybe little tears too, but it's not really that bad. It's the sewing that's just like, oh, like I said, as you saw earlier, that's like a 9-piece section, and that was some serious work. It was about 4 hours of sewing and stapling, so kind of sucked, but overall it's pretty good. Again, keep in mind this is a budget boat, so I would say it turned out pretty good for what it is. It's not perfect, but again, we're not shooting for perfect for a budget boat. And as you can tell, the boat is filthy again, so I have to clean it again. So that said, let's figure out what we're going to do with this rear swim deck, and let's move forward. Okay, so moving forward to the rear sun deck, I toyed around with the idea of maybe possibly painting it, get a nice high gloss, would be kind of neat looking. But the more I started thinking about it, like it's because of the foam and everything, it's bubbled up so much it'll sit lower. It's probably not going to look right. It definitely isn't going to look right, white, even if I clean it up real good. So between white and then paint, I just don't think either one of them are going to fit. So I think I am going to go ahead and reupholster it to match everything else like it is supposed to be. I think though in the center for the sun deck, I am probably going to do the turf because I think it just kind of blends the whole boat together. So I think that's what I'm going to run with. As you'll see right now, I've already taken out all these bolts here, so this is loose just sitting here. I went ahead and got rid of all the bad foam around the outsides of it. I was able to save a little bit here in the center, not so bad. But what I'm going to have to do is get everything cut out, do a little bit of sewing along these edges, and then everything else is going to be cut out. And again, it's going to be stapled to this bottom side here, so I don't think it's going to be hard. I'll go take care of that real quick, and I'll show you exactly what it looks like when it's all said and done. Alright, so I got all the vinyl cut out and ready for the rear swim deck. And now I'm installing, obviously, foam because the foam was destroyed. The center section was okay, but we needed more on the outside, so I'm cutting the outsides to fit and tacking it on with some glue. I'm going to go ahead and wrap everything on there, and then again, I will show you what it looks like if I make it through this crazy tornado that is about to come through. Alright, so there is our swim deck, and I'm going to be honest, I'm getting pretty impressed by my skills with sewing right now. Again, I didn't Google anything, or upholstery, I didn't Google anything, I just tried it. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's turned out pretty darn good. A little bubbly right here. It is, I can probably fix that. But all in all, it's a nice tight fit. And it's formed. And you'd never know that the foam was messed up. So, time to move forward again. Like I told you, I'm going to put this right here on this right here. I don't really want a foam pad. It always could be added. I just want it to be able to be a little bit more consistent running from the back all the way through the boat, and I think that would do it. So I'm going to try that. Plus, I already have the stuff. It doesn't cost any extra money. The foam is actually fairly expensive, and for a 2-inch piece of foam right there, it'd probably cost me about 60 bucks. Plus the vinyl, another, you're talking about 80 bucks in total, I'd say $80, $85 just to do that pad. So that's not including the chunk of wood you'd have to put on there. So I think I'll try the foam that I already have. Again, if I don't like it, I'll put the pad right over top of it. That's fine. Let me get a hold of that and get right back to show what that looks like. So just before we put the back padding on here, we do have one thing that we have to deal with, and that is that hole right there. Now, what happened before is there was a big pad that was basically snapped down to the front of this thing, and the pad allowed, I believe, some venting through that hole right there. And that'd be a problem if we covered over top of it. One, not only because it would not be venting, but two, if somebody walked on top there, let's say in bare feet, there goes your big toe, and nobody wants that. So what we're gonna do is we are gonna incorporate a vent that looks like this, and there you go. That is our reinforced vent, and if I modeled it right, it should snap right into place by these little guys right here and have just enough clearance for the fiberglass and the foam pad that we're putting over top of it. So I think that ought to be about perfect, and we're going to use a reinforced plastic that will not melt in the sun. So let's get to it printed, and let me show you what it looks like. All right, so the back swim deck is now on, and we have one more thing to do to it, and that is install our fancy little toe saver plug thing. So let's see how it fits. I haven't tried to do this yet. Not really sure. Guess it looks probably fine right there. There it is, look at that. I would have preferred to do it gray or silver, but I didn't have any. All I had in a PETG plastic was black, so it is what it is. I think overall it looks pretty darn good. Now that the upholstery is finally done, it's time to move forward. We got a bimini top to put on. All right, and so for the next step in electrical, what we need to do is work on these nasty rocker switches. Now, as you can see, they are peeling apart. They are super sticky when you touch them. It sticks to them and it doesn't come off your fingers, and you can kind of see they peel apart. They're pretty gross. So we have a few different options here. One, we just simply peel all this nasty rubber off and they're just clear plastic, and that works perfectly fine. Two, we can take all that off and put this in some tool dipping that makes it basically re-rubber texturized if we want to. That's utilizing the same switches. If I decide I want to replace it, which would be option 3, I have bought a panel set here. I have 2 different options on option 3. Either one, I can replace the whole switch, which I'll have to see if those switches are the same size indeed and say have the same wiring. And then if that doesn't work out, I can replace just the caps here possibly. So the first thing I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna take this thing out right here. I'm gonna see what it's like and how it compares to the new one. And that'll determine whether I'm gonna keep the old ones or use the new ones. All right, so in comparing size, they are about identical. The only difference I can see is where this little red button is going right here. It has one extra male spade tab, and I think the reason that is there is because it's jumping from one to the next on this panel here. I think that's the only difference. I think, if I'm correct, that this should plug in. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to plug this thing in. I'm gonna see what it does. Hopefully we don't fry nothing, but all this is some lighting for the LED cup holder, so I'm not really too concerned about it. So I'm gonna plug that in and let's see what happens. All right, so as you can see, I got the switch plugged in. I'm gonna go ahead and flip it on and kind of cross my fingers to make sure nothing bad happens. Okay, it looks like it's working. So you see that the blue switch right there is lit up. You can kind of see the red LEDs right there. So it works. That's fantastic. So that means that I can rip out all 6 of these maybe. One is momentary, so I probably can't do nothing about that. I probably have to keep that one. But I think at least the other 5 will be fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull all those out. I gotta label them too. This thing should have come with labels, hopefully. Yes, it did. So we'll have labels for it. Yeah, let me go ahead and throw those in. All right, and there you go. And basically how it went down was the only switches I replaced were these 2. Reason why? For some reason when I replaced these lights, they didn't work correctly, did all kinds of weird things. So I put the originals back. It's kind of hard to see because they don't have LED lights like the top do, but whatever, it is what it is. This one, again, this one was a momentary switch, so I didn't want to mess with that one. That basically tells you when the fuel is low, and you can turn it off from beeping or whatever else. And then obviously the horn, which it works when it wants to. Whatever. So that's momentary as well, so I couldn't switch that. So these 2 were successful right here. Bilge pump works. As you can hear, blower works. Switches are done. Let's move forward. Okay, so moving forward at this point, we have a little bit of electrical work to do. We do have a radio and some speakers to put in. We have a new buzzer that we're going to put in. Hopefully that works. I expect it will. We'll find out there. A few other things, like little small things, but one of those things, the first thing we're going to do, this tack over here doesn't work. So a lot of times what happens is the solder points get cold, or I believe they call it a cold solder, and they stop working. Not usually the gauge itself, but what we're going to do right now is we're going to try to attempt to fix that if that is the problem. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the storage compartment here. Move everything out of the way, if I can with one hand. All right, so I want to look in here. I want to disconnect the gauge right here. Simple plug here. And then you'll see this outer ribbed area, I guess you can call it, spins off. It's not very easy to do with one hand. I'm probably not going to be able to do it. But this basically will spin off, and that thing will slide out of the front, and then we're going to have to take this thing apart. Let me get that out, and then I'll show you what we do from there. Okay, so I got everything taken apart from it, all the caps off, the nut off. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take a jigsaw, not a jigsaw, but a handsaw. I'm going to cut all around this edge. Slowly but surely, this whole thing will pop off and should separate. And then we'll be able to get to the electronics we need to get to. Alright, so I just cut all around that. The surround on the inside actually didn't like it so much, so I'm going to have to kind of grind that down and smooth it. It won't be perfect, but it's better than what it was if it works. So here's the face here. We're going to go ahead and turn it out. You can't really mess up how it goes back in because obviously the connector goes through there. And then here is our unit here. And from what I recall, it's been a few years, it was these ones here that need to be resoldered or reflowed. But that's okay. What we're going to do is we're going to go over every single one on this. And then obviously if that doesn't fix it, we'll need to replace the unit. But worst case scenario, You know, if I gotta replace it, I do. But like I said, if we can save it somehow or another and save ourselves like 125 bucks for a used one, I'm definitely gonna do it. Okay guys, so the last part of this electronics section is gonna be putting in new tacks. I was only one tack down, as you saw, the tack being broke, and well, I don't feel like spending 150 bucks on another one that's going to be used and faded just like the one I have. And I'm thinking if I can get 150 bucks out of the one I have that works, well, that makes sense. So what I did was I bought 2 of these right here. Now this is a cheap aftermarket replacement, not necessarily for a jet boat or any boat, but it works from anything from a 1 to 10 cylinder. And so I thought, you know what, why not give it a try? Now I don't necessarily care if this thing's perfectly accurate. I just care that it's same from one side to the other. That's the reason I bought 2 of them. So what we're gonna do right now is I'm gonna go ahead and hook everything up, check out the wiring and see what needs to be done to get these things installed. Alright, so I went ahead and looked at some of the wiring. That is what we have to figure out now. And here's what I came up with. I used a multimeter to basically test everything. I went ahead and pushed the key to give me some temporary power. Our black is actually black. Our purple is our switched power. Our blue here is going to be for our lighting. And our gray here is our signal wire. Now, I'm not going to use the blue, and the reason why, that these tacks are kind of weird. I had to take the lighting and the power and combine them, which I thought was kind of odd. But there is some kind of strange, I don't know, instructions, I guess you could say. It says that the red is ignition switch, and the yellow is dash or ignition switch. Kind of weird. So I went ahead and just put those together, and the reason that is okay is because this is a switch to power when you take the key off. It only has like 10 or 20 seconds to stay on, so the lights will go off by themselves. It won't drain the battery, so we'll be all right there. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and cut this connector off right here. I'm going to wire one in, and then we'll go ahead and mount it in and see what it looks like. All right, so I got everything wired in, as you can see right here. I went ahead and mounted in one of the gauges. I think it looks pretty darn good, even though it's not white face gauge. And what it's time to do now is go ahead and throw on our key, turn it over to see if it works. Let it cycle. It worked. That's all we needed to see. Time to basically put in the other one. All right, second one is now installed and fully wired. Time to test it, make sure it works. Let it cycle. Let it cycle. Let's turn it over and test. All right, perfect. It works. That's exactly what we needed to see. Finally, the electronics part is done. Let's move forward. So I was excited. I thought we were done. And I realized I have to set the amount of cylinders. This is somewhat easy. All you really need to do is, if you look at the back of the gauge, you'll see there's a little black button on there. That button has to be pressed a certain amount of time until it goes to the number of cylinders, like 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. Obviously, these are 2 cylinders. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna give it some power. It should cycle. I'll reach back, press the button. Takes a second before it kicks in. I don't know why. There it is. I'm going to go ahead and 5, 6, 7, 8, and then back to 1 and 2, and we'll let it settle. It should drop. Perfect. We're set. And so here we have our new aftermarket buzzer, or piezo buzzer, whatever you want to call that thing. We're going to mount this in the same location that the old one was mounted in. And what I had to do that was take, obviously, the old one out. Now, all it is a basically twist cap that goes on the underside right here. So you're just going to want to break that thing loose, spin it counterclockwise. This thing will pull out. I am going to utilize the original plug right here, so I can plug this right into that. And if it ever needs to be replaced, I just pull the plug out and replace it again. So pretty straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wire this up with a couple wire connectors or butt connectors right now. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug it into the bottom down here. We're going to test out and make sure that thing gives us the buzzing noise that we need. All right, so right now we got it plugged in, as you can see right there. And then what I had to do is take a file and just file out a little bit around the old hole right you see right there. And that thing popped in nice and tight. So now is the moment of truth. Let's go and figure out if this thing makes the noises we want it to. All right, that's perfect. You guys heard that. So try it one more time with a little closer up so you can hear it better. That's exactly what we need. All right, we did something right. Let's move forward. The next step in our electrical side is replacing the radio. Now, as you can see, the radio, well, I don't know, I don't have a face to it, but I don't know what you would do with it. I don't even know if it has a CD in it, nothing about it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rip this thing out. Basically took the bucket out. I probably can go ahead and unplug this harness and whatever else is plugged into it and maybe rip this thing out. So that's junk. Now we got the new one here. I'm gonna have to rewire it, obviously. It's just a cheap pile. It's basically not a CD player because nobody uses CDs anymore. But this was fairly inexpensive. I want to say 4 6.5 speakers, which is going to replace these old nasty things. And the head unit was like 50 bucks or something, so it's a really good deal. I'll go ahead and put a link for the description in the description for that below. If you guys are interested in this radio here, you guys can throw it in and pick it up there. So, anyways, moving forward, I'm gonna throw this thing in. I gotta wire it in real quick, and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, so I redoing all the wiring, getting rid of all this ghetto house wiring that they had in the boat, which is strange, but whatever. And then I realized that they're positive and negative on their speaker wires, which is probably not correct. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the speakers out so I can figure out which is which of all the different colors, because I don't know what the diagram is. So I go to take out a speaker, of course, and then look what I find. I mean, I don't know who to be mad at. Who, one, uses a flathead screw anymore, and more so, who makes them? Why are they made? Who uses and makes flathead screws? Why? I'm no genius, but I'm going to say that the guy that used house wiring for the radio, he probably did this too. And there is a completion of our radio. I'd love to play you music, but obviously it's full of copyrighted stuff that I can't play. But I tell you, it does actually sound really good. Not like crazy amplifier good, but like for a cheap radio, it actually sounds bassy and it sounds pretty good. I can't complain. It's louder than I expected for being 35 watts or whatever the continuous is. So anyways, I definitely would recommend that for a boat if you're not trying to do nothing crazy like a tower with speakers that you need 17,000 people to hear behind you. Definitely worth it. I'll put that in the link in the description below. All right, and moving on, one other problem that we do have is that we don't have a rubber strap for our rear ladder. And this is a problem because when you're driving with no strap, it starts going like this. That's obviously not a good thing. So with that said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take out the bolt where the original strap was. I've got an extra battery strap from some kind of jet ski. We're gonna cut it down, we're gonna drill a hole in it, and we're gonna mount it right here so it can wrap around. Let me get that done and I'll show you exactly what that looks like. And there's our strap. Let's go ahead and pick this thing up, make sure everything functions as it should. Wrap it around, and there's our strap. Perfect, let's move on. Okay guys, so we're back from the lake, and I gotta say the boat ran and drove just absolutely amazing. It is a pretty quick boat at 48 miles per hour on very choppy water on a Sunday in a small lake that was overcrowded. So you can imagine this is probably about a 52 mile an hour boat, I would say, with the aftermarket impellers that it has. So really now at this point, it's time to talk about the investment and was the boat worth it. Normally at this point in the video, I go through and I tell you everything that we got put into it, all the money, and give you an exact dollar figure that the toy would have cost us to own after everything had been done. This time we're going to do something a little bit different. We are going to have you guys comment below what you guys think that we spent on this boat, and then you guys can determine was it worth its purchase price and all the work that went into it. I will say that it was a lot of work, especially because of the interior. I've already said that once. But I also want to state that for what you can get and what we got into it, it was pretty impressive for what we got. The only key hints that I'm going to give you right now is that the purchase price of the boat was $1,000, and we also purchased a jet ski that was $1,000 for the motor. Now keep in mind, there's a lot more parts on that jet ski than just a motor, and our friends and also sponsors at jetmotorsports.net are going to help us get some of that money back, so keep that in mind when you comment below. That said, I appreciate you guys sticking around. I hope you guys like this little episode and this little series on these boats. If so, definitely hit that like button, and if you're not already, definitely subscribe, because we got more content, more builds coming, and I'm going to see you on the next one.